Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. We have another great episode for you guys today. And, with the aging population, there are many threats to safety and security in that industry. Today, we're going to be addressing some of the specifics of keeping the medical industry and the devices that people rely on secure with today's guest. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Safety Talk on your favorite podcast network or our YouTube channel and help us spread the word about safety and security. I'm your host and safety sensei, Pete Canavan, and our guest on this episode of Safety Talk is Christian Espinoza. Christian is a best-selling author and entrepreneur. He excels in cybersecurity and real estate. Interesting combination there. He's dedicated to inspiring others to harness their innate wisdom, overcome perceived barriers, and tread new paths. As an adventure enthusiast, Christian has completed 24 Ironman triathlons and 2 of the 7 summits. And I'm not quite sure what those are, but I'm sure they are related. You can tell us about that. And that, he embodies transformational leadership as well as relentless exploration. Sounds interesting. His company is called Blue Goat Cyber, and they work with securing medical devices. And we're going to get into that in some detail today with him. So it's my pleasure today to welcome Christian Espinoza of Blue Goat Cyber to Safety Talk. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you, Pete. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the awesome intro.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. We have threats to security from every sort of angle, right? This is, I'm excited for today's episode because this is a track that we have not discussed before. And so, the population, as I said at the onset, is getting older. They have all kinds of, threats to their safety and security, both from being scammed, being the victims of, malware and phishing attempts and even, scam phone calls. But now they've also, have to worry about their medical devices being hacked because cyber criminals they're relentless. When there's a will, there's a way. When there's enough time and energy and resources thrown at any sort of, anything, the criminals can eventually hack into it. And when you're dealing with life or death and devices that people need to, run their lives and keep themselves healthy and alive, whether it's a pacemaker or something else, that's a scary, prospect. So I'm sure our listeners are going to want to learn more about that. So maybe you could kind of give us just an overview, first off, of how you got into the cybersecurity industry, and then more specifically, what Blue Goat is all about.
I used to be in the military, in the Air Force, and I did cybersecurity in the Air Force, and then for the DoD a while, and I took that knowledge and applied it to the commercial sector. This is my Blue Goat Cyber is my second cybersecurity company. I built one and sold it. I sold it in 2020. So I started Blue Goat Cyber a couple years ago. In my first company, we focused on medical devices. I wanted to have a niche that wasn't super competitive, but it was also something I could get behind because it's important to secure a website so somebody doesn't steal your credit cards information. But with a medical device, there's all this advancement in healthcare, and I would hate for that advancement to be rolled back because somebody, hacks into these medical devices. And the thing about the medical devices is very tangible. If someone steals your credit card information, it's an inconvenience. If somebody hacks into a medical device that your mother or your grandmother is on, or a loved one that's sustaining their life, it could be lethal. So it's very tangible. And I just decided to niche down on that and focus our competency and our skill set on helping secure those medical devices. And these range from a device that could do diagnostics on your blood to an implantable device like a pacemaker to a device connected to a hospital bed like a drug infusion pump. And on average, there's 14 devices surrounding a hospital bed, and most of those devices have some sort of vulnerability.
And the smaller the device, the less security really can get built into it because it's not like a whole computer or a device that's designed with that security. It's probably a lot of times maybe wasn't even a thought when the device was developed, and now you've got
Mhm.
to figure out a way to secure that. So yeah, that really puts in perspective. It's one thing to, maybe have some money stolen, but it's another to have your life taken, right?
Yeah, and it's pretty alarming. Like a lot of pacemakers were recalled. The Medtronic's pacemakers were recalled, and Dick Cheney had a pacemaker, one that was vulnerable because somebody could wirelessly connect to the pacemaker, an attacker, and cause it just to shock you incessantly over and over and over and kill you. So he
Wow.
actually got so concerned about the threat that he had his pacemaker removed for a while.
Hmm. Yeah, that's scary, you know, and it just goes to show you just never know where the threats are gonna come from. So, what inspired your focus on the medical devices? Just the fact that because of your experience, you saw how vulnerable they were.
In 2015, my first cybersecurity company, we got a contract to work on medical devices. And after that, I just decided this is the niche I want to focus on because in cybersecurity, everybody's selling some sort of cybersecurity product or some sort of service, and it's really like a red ocean. There's a lot of sharks, you know. So I thought medical devices would be more of a blue ocean strategy for me, where there's not a lot of competitors doing it. And as I mentioned before, it's something I feel connected to that I can get behind.
Was that part of the blue and Blue Goat Cyber? How'd you come up with that name?
Uh, Blue is my favorite color. I think blue is very calming. Some people tell me my energy has a blue uh, tint to it. So it's my favorite color. It's a trusting color. It's a calming color. And then I have the name Goat. I like to climb mountains. The
Okay.
seven summits are the highest mountain on every continent. I've done two of those, and I climbed other mountains. And you always see goats, and I like the what goats represent. They're always trying to climb something and get to the next level, and they're persistent, sometimes a little bit stubborn, but they're always trying to like ascend to the next level.
Sounds like you're sort of talking about me because I'm a Capricorn, so I'm a goat, and I'm always butting heads with my wife. I'm stubborn,
Yeah.
right? We're stubborn, but
My
driven.
girlfriend's a Capricorn. I understand. I'm a Sagittarius. So I'm
You're
stubborn too.
close.
I'm fireside.
Yes, but that's pretty funny. But hey, stubborn and persistent can be good traits, especially when you are in an industry that requires that persistence to ensure that people are safe and secure no matter what track you're taking, right? I mean, giving up is not an option. We have to
Right.
figure out every problem has to be looked at as an opportunity, and these threats and issues require solutions. And so, I think that's a very good strategy. You're figuring out, hey, this is where there's vulnerability. This is where we're focusing our energy and attention. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of um, interest in that because it is so critical. And like I said, the market is getting larger, so it's not shrinking. The
Yeah.
problem, and that means the problem getting bigger, which means if you've got a larger attack surface, there's more potential for those problems to happen, and that's scary, especially when it's something that you need to live. So
Yeah.
the if you're looking at you know medical devices here, uh, is your target market only hospitals, or would it be smaller medical offices as well? Like, sort of explain to our listeners, like, who would be the companies or the medical institutions that would require the services of Blue Goat Cyber to protect their equipment and their patients.
It's the medical device manufacturers themselves. They are responsible for the security of their device. A hospital will connect it to their environment, but the device manufacturer has to go and update it and make sure it's secure. So that's the target audience. And then the FDA has to approve medical devices from a cybersecurity perspective and a safety perspective. And just late last year, they issued a lot of new guidance to really up the ante on device manufacturers to make sure their devices are secure because there's been quite a few vulnerabilities in the past, and with this, we're talking about patient safety, not privacy. So it's critical.
Yeah, that's so do you feel like you need to educate the end user more, or is that the job of the manufacturer that's coming up with the device saying, hey, you should be buying our device because it's more secure, because it's got, X, Y, and Z features as opposed to the competitor that maybe doesn't?
Yeah, I think that's part of the marketing and the sales of the device. If you're selling a device to a hospital and you've got a couple competitors that maybe have an MRI machine or something like that, if you can prove that your device is more secure and you've done all this cybersecurity, that may be a selling point.
Mhm.
From a consumer perspective, if you are looking at getting an implantable, like a pacemaker or something along those lines, I think it's from an awareness perspective important to ask some questions about the security of that device.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute, because if someone listening is like, "Hey, man, I have a pacemaker, my mom or my dad or my uncle or whoever has one, how do I know what questions to ask to determine whether or not this is one of the more secure ones?" Because we all know there's no such thing as 100% security, right? I mean, that
Mhm.
just doesn't exist. But if it can be more secure than the next one, what would they need to look at? Like, is there um, a listing of companies that manufacture these things with like safety ratings? Like, how would somebody approach that?
They can look up the manufacturer and the model number, and there are plenty of sites that will tell you if there's vulnerabilities associated with that specific model. And then the bottom line is they should be going after something more recent because of the more stringent requirements from the FDA. It's very difficult to get something through the FDA without it going to a huge degree of scrutiny for cybersecurity. In the past, even like a year ago or 2 years ago, it was it wasn't easy, but it was a lot easier than it is now.
Is
A
that
lot
because
less
of the whole
scrutiny.
CISA, the cybersecurity infrastructure, and then now with just so much more awareness that they're really tightening up the requirements necessary to get approval?
It's because of that, and then we've had a few attacks that have affected a lot of devices. Like there's one of them called Shell Shock, which was an attack against Bash, which is a command line type of interface for
Mhm.
Linux, which a lot of medical devices run on. So the challenge with that in the past, a lot of devices were not sure that they had that open source software as part of their software. So
Mhm.
they didn't know that their software was vulnerable. So now, to solve that problem, the FDA is requiring you, if you're a manufacturer, to have like a complete inventory of all the software that you put into your software and where it came from, what version it is, and then also have a plan if something happens, how you're going to update your device in the field.
Gotcha. Whether it's a firmware update or an operating system update or something, but
Right,
yeah, I mean,
right.
things change all the time, so you need to have something that's upgradable and not closed, because otherwise you might as well brick it, right? I mean, just like you throw it away, you can't upgrade it, and then that's a waste of money. So people don't want to do that. Uh, the so you are um, how would you sort of, with a company that deals with devices or even other products or solutions that have a component where they need to be aware of the cybersecurity side of things? Are there any strategies that you would say, hey, here's why you need to improve the awareness for cybersecurity, or how do you sort of embed that awareness into the culture of a company? Because I mean, this is one of the things that I talk about. I have a program that helps businesses develop plans for recovering from cyber attack, and one of those
Mhm,
very first steps is taking a look at the culture, the
mhm.
mission of the company, the vision of the company, and then what's the corporate culture. So I'd love to get your take on sort of what your thoughts are on that.
But it depends on the company. I think with like medical device manufacturers or anyone that develops software, part of the culture is the people that are actually developing the product, that are coding the application. And with software developers, from my experience, and I've worked with a lot of them, they typically don't understand security. And this is why we have so many security issues. They understand how to make something work and how to make it look good and how to make the functions efficient. But they don't understand how someone can break in if they don't do certain controls on the software. So I think they need to be trained on that. And that's something we need to go back to, like even school or where programming is taught, because security is not really part of the content. So that would solve a lot of the problems from a general like staff perspective. And I've done a lot of awareness training. I think one of the biggest challenges people have is we constantly in cybersecurity talk about what we call FUD. We spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it's just kind of spread in this amorphous way without anything tangible. So what I've done in the past from an awareness perspective to train people and companies have shown them what it looks like from the attacker perspective if you open a phishing email, to kind of walk through and make it more tangible versus a 10-minute video watch that says don't click on phishing emails or something like that. It doesn't really resonate with someone unless you make it tangible and show, oh, this is what they actually do, and it can severely compromise me as an individual and my organization as well.
I think that's a good approach, because a lot of people don't understand it. They just know they shouldn't click on it, but why shouldn't I click on it? And what happens if I do click on something? And going back, even a step further, how do I recognize that so that I don't get tricked, that I don't, end up compromising both my, personal safety and security and identity if I'm doing it, on a personal system, if I'm at home, but then, like you said, compromising a corporate network because you might be clicking on something that opens up a back door into the company's system. And now there's a much bigger problem, because now critical systems can go down, and work can't get done, and products can't go out the door, and other very bad things can happen when people don't understand the ramifications. And it's crazy, because I mean it's a massive percentage. I don't remember what it is offhand, but it's like 70 or 80% of most hacks are coming in through email. And they're getting really good at tricking people. They use logos of other companies. Stuff looks legit. You're getting emails from companies like that will purport to be like DocuSign or, your local bank, Wells Fargo or whoever, and they look legitimate. And it's like, hey, we've got some new features or something on your account, or there's been something that we're not quite sure. We need you to check this out. Click here. Oh, wow. What's the problem? Click. Oh, oops. Shouldn't have done that. And, right. And it's scary, but going back to like the vulnerability with the coding, that's so true. I mean, I did coding when I was in school, a little bit after, and I don't like it. I'd much rather talk to a person than a computer. But you're right. I mean, the most programmers, they are like, well, okay, how do I make my code more efficient? How do I get the job done? How do I make it, run more quickly, right? How do I get the results back from these queries faster, whatever it happens to be that they're doing? And the security side of it is an afterthought. And really, I mean, what I tell people all the time, because there's a confusion, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, where people say like, oh, well, my IT department's taking care of that, and we've got backups, and we've got security and firewalls. And I'm like, no. It's like, no offense, but it's like the fox watching the hen house. The role of information technology in IT is to create value for an organization. The job of cybersecurity is to protect that value. And so you can't have one protecting itself. You have to have a separate entity. You've got to have a separate division. You've got to have a separate person, whatever, that can objectively take a look at what is there and what those vulnerabilities are without that biased view, right? Because we all think what we do is good. It's like, oh yeah, it's secure enough, it's fast enough, it's good enough, whatever. But, and maybe, hey, you have to kind of have some thicker skin. But if somebody comes in and says, hey, you know what, this is good, but here's some things that we need to do to make it more secure, maybe not completely bulletproof, but we need to make it so that you're going to be more protected, because there are all these new vulnerabilities and threats that are coming out there, and you didn't build this with that in mind. And right. And it is scary, because every time you turn around, the technology is changing. And what's really got me, scared, and I'm sure a lot of people too, is now the bad guys are using AI. So artificial intelligence can be used for good, but it can be used for, criminal activity as well. And these guys are starting to harness the power of AI to hack systems. Ask the AI, what's the best way to hack into X, Y, and Z? And it comes back and says, well, there's known vulnerabilities and this and that. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is not good. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the things you said before, I'm a big proponent of the IT and cybersecurity are separate skill sets. But a lot of organizations I talk to, they say, well, our IT department they have a firewall in place. So we're set cybersecurity wise. And then
Mm-hmm.
any of those organizations that have said that, and we've actually done a penetration test or ethical hack against them, we've been able to get in and find major issues. So I think they are separate, like you said. And as far as AI goes, ultimately we're kind of headed towards this AI versus AI battle because phishing emails can be written by AI
Mm-hmm.
based on specific target demographic information or a specific company. And then on the defense side, we have AI trying to recognize that this is an AI generated email.
Right.
Just last night I had Chat GPT write some stuff, and then I ran it through an AI detector, and it said it was 100%. But then went back and told Chat GPT to write it to bypass an AI detector and to be more human like. And
Oh, no.
I went back to the AI detector, and it said it's like 15% AI. So if you set
Wow.
up your AI the right way, you can kind of bypass the AI filters, which is interesting that you can program the AI to be more like a human and avoid detection by other AIs. So
It's weird, man. It's like this whole cycle, right? And it's freaky. I mean, because I've been playing around with it too, and it's scary how good it can get. But you got to, and the more information you're feeding it, the better it gets. And then you can keep
right,
going back and adding it to refine it and rewrite it and give you more details or give me more focus on this and less focus on that. And some of the companies I deal with, um, that I have memberships with that have, for speaking and stuff like that, a lot of them now are starting to come up with their own AI tools to help you do things like write speeches, help you with workshops, design, uh, seminars, all kinds of stuff. And then take that information and say, all right, now take that 90-minute keynote and break it into a 3-day workshop. And it comes
right.
back and it's like, oh, well, here you go. On day one, here's what you can do. On day two, it's like, oh my God, like the amount of time it saves you. And then, of course, you have to go back and tweak it yourself. But yeah, it is sort of becoming a battle, AI versus AI. And I don't know where we're going with it, but it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's worth. Some people say if you don't learn AI like this year, your skill set is going to be pretty obsolete if you're in have a technical skill set.
Which is freaky and should freak a lot of people out because a lot of people
Yeah,
still are clueless about it and haven't played with it. So yeah, if you haven't already, those listening and watching, just go play around with it, and see what it can do, and it'll really give you a good sort of sense of what can be done with it, and that'll definitely help in that understanding. So Chris, you've
yeah.
written a few books, right?
I've written 2 books. So I'm working on my third. Yes.
Oh, nice. What were those books about? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that.
My first book is called The Smartest Person in the Room. It's about my first cybersecurity company and my entrepreneurial journey because I realized through my company, I made a lot of mistakes and paid a lot of dumb tax, as they say. One of the biggest challenges I had with my company was a lack of emotional intelligence or lack of people skills in my staff and in myself to a degree. Because in cybersecurity, it's notorious for hiring people that are super rationally intelligent or have super high IQs, but almost no EQ. And we sort of just tolerate it in the industry. And I realized that most of my problems, like I said, 99% of them were because my staff lacked the people skills. They talked over a client's head, made a client feel stupid, didn't make them feel
Mhm.
understood, didn't communicate well with each other or collaborate well. So I worked to fix that in my organization and the steps that worked. I call it the secure methodology. I wrote about that in my book and that experience.
Very interesting. Yeah, we had somebody on the podcast about I don't know, a year or so ago talking about EQ and how it's
Mhm.
important. And you're right, it's very lacking in the technical space because most people lack those skills. They're very technical, they're very good at talking to computers and programming and whatnot. But I think in any industry where you're highly technical, it's very easy to talk over the heads of somebody that doesn't understand it. And it's really important to be able to kind of bring things down a bit, right? So that people can understand it and at a level that they still can understand what's going on without having to know all the technical background of things, right? And what every little acronym means. You start talking in letters, people just their eyes are going to gloss over and they're not going to know what you're talking about. They're just going to sit there and nod their head and be like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And when it's all said and done, they'll be like, what were they just talking about? And they'll have no clue. And that's not good for anybody. So very interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like in cybersecurity, uh, in other industries, we all want to be significant. I feel like in cybersecurity, people predominantly feel significant by being, quote, smarter than somebody else. And the way they show that is by talking over someone's head, and that's how you protect your identity of, quote, being smarter than somebody else,
Mhm.
versus communicating in a way that they understand it. So it's like it's a big shift in your mindset as well. You have to be comfortable that the purpose of the communication is to make sure the person you're communicating with understands what you're talking about and not blame them for being stupid. Blame yourself and take ownership that maybe I should change how I am communicating.
I would agree 110%. And that's one of the things I've always tried to do in my business is make sure that any technical topic, I make sure that I make it, I can explain it in such a way that it's very simple for the client to understand. Because if they don't understand it, why should they, for example, invest in it? If I'm trying to
Hmm.
sell, a new product or a service, it's like, well, I don't understand. Why do I need that? Well, because you do. That's not an answer. And if you start throwing technical jargon at them, they're going to be like, well, I still don't understand it. We're starting to see now, though, like with um, insurance companies uh, starting to require certain levels of proof of protection of servers and
Right.
networks before they'll issue cyber insurance policies, right? Because they don't want to get stuck, foot in the bill for something that might have been easily preventable, or at least maybe partially preventable, because the customer was able to put in place some sort of protections. But if they don't understand them, what they do, how to, and why, they're not going to do it. They're going to look at it as an expense. And that's part of the big problem too with security in any industry, right? People don't want to spend money for stuff they're not going to get a return on it. Well, I tell them, look,
Right.
man, you're spending that money so you don't have to end up with a big bill later, or maybe even go out of business. Because if your company is hacked and you can't recover, you're done. Now it's affecting
That's
you.
right.
It's affecting your employees, your vendors, your suppliers, your board. Every single person that company touches is going to be affected, and you don't want to be the one that's responsible for that. So you've got to make some investments, some smart investments, right? You don't want to spend more money than you're making. If your company's making $300,000 a year, you're not going to spend $400,000 a year to protect it, right? But you better come
Right.
up with a workable number that makes sense, that gives you some adequate protections, and you live with that. We'd all love to have the greatest and the best, but the reality is you can't justify that sometimes, and so you have to be, realistic. And that kind of leads me into another question I wanted to ask you, which was what what have you been able to do to sort of help those executives that are non-technical, gain a better understanding or a deeper understanding of cybersecurity so that they can make those decisions for their company?
I think cybersecurity is really just about reducing the risk to an acceptable level. It's sort of like insurance. Nobody
Mhm.
wants it, but you pretty much have to have it. And it's been overly complicated. The bottom line is, for a non-technical executive, there's like, if it depends on your maturity of your organization, uh, but there's a few things you should really be doing. We've been inundated in cybersecurity with these like 100-item checklists, and people say you need to do everything on this 100-item checklist, but that's not true. If you're a small organization with 15 people, you don't have the resources to do all 100 things. So the priorities need to be clear on what needs to be done first to reduce the risk the most. And then if you have more time and more effort, you could, do other things later. So simple things across the organization, like patching your systems and patching your applications and multi-factor authentication and segmenting your critical data away from your users, uh, training your staff, things like that are pretty simple and will give you a major return for the effort versus, trying to install some next gen intrusion detection system or something that is way down the line from the fundamentals. I think we often get overly complicate this and try to tell people they need to do everything versus these 5 major things. Only once you've mastered those things, then go on to the next thing.
I think that's really good advice because it's easy to get overwhelmed, right? You hear all about stuff in the news. You hear about hacks in the news. You know you have to do more to protect your company, for example, but you may not know where to start. Or if you start trying to do some research on your own, you're like, oh my God, this can end up costing us, silly amounts of money to try to do this. But I agree 100%, Christian. You do the fundamentals. You implement the things that are no cost or low cost first. Right? Like two-factor or multi-factor authentication. We're all getting used to that now. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, right? Because every time you're logging into something, it's like, okay, all right, where's the text on my phone? Here's the number. But you know what? It's become a fact of life because it's just one more way that we can try to protect ourselves in our accounts and our access to things, our money, our finances, our data. It's important that we do that. So yeah, it's a pain maybe sometimes, but these things are low cost, but as you said, they yield high returns for that and that minimal investment. Training's another one. We talked about a little bit ago that if people understand what to look for, now they can start to recognize these threats and not be fooled into clicking the wrong link, visiting the wrong website, or, there's low tech too, right? You could get a phone call from somebody and that person's just done research on the company's website. They've got the board of directors there. They've got the president. They got all the information about the company. And now they start name dropping the secretary on the phone or the person in HR or wherever they're trying to get into. If it's like, say, personnel records, right? They're going to say, hey, so-and-so, John Smith on the board, I just started working for him. We go way back. I've been wanting to work for his company a long time. He finally brought me on board and he's working on his new project he brought me on. I'm all excited about, but he needs some information. I don't know where to get it. Can you help me out? Right. And the person on the other end's like, yeah, sure. I'll help you out. What do you need, man? It's not someone that works for the company, but they sure sound like it because they're name dropping. They're talking about stuff that maybe is relevant to whatever the company is because they've done their research. Right. And that's where you get into the whole spear phishing, right? Where you're it's not a phishing in an email per se, but you're doing the same thing, but in a low tech fashion. Again, we're naturally trusting people. You want to believe the person at the other end of the line, but so how do you prevent that from turning into a major nightmare for the company where that person maybe is willing to share that data? Well, you better have some procedures in place that say, well, okay, if someone requests this sort of information, it's got to go through this person and this person who both have to sign off on it before that information can leave the company, for example, right? So having different procedures in place, and that doesn't really cost you anything other than some time and some research and it doesn't cost you money, but if you don't have them, it could cost you a lot of money. So put those procedures
that's not
in
a
place.
technical. Those procedures are simple to implement, and a lot of accounts receivable fraud or wire fraud happens. And a procedure would resolve that. If you have 2 people check this before the transaction goes out, that would generally solve it. Especially if the request came from the CEO, then you should actually check in with the CEO. Right. And that's a procedural thing.
Yep. And people might say, "Oh, I don't want to bother him." Yeah, bother him. You might be saving a guy 50 grand or whatever. It's like do your due diligence. Do your due diligence. And nobody should get upset by that. They should be applauding the employees, like say, hey, thanks for taking that extra step. And I'm sure you've run into this many times because I've run into this many times where something just doesn't smell right. And you're like, you know what, there's something about this I don't know. And you do some extra steps, some extra research, whether it's something that, new business may be coming in, somebody's trying to do business with you or form a partnership or get a quote on equipment. And it's like something just doesn't smell right. So you do some extra digging. You make an extra phone call. What does it take you? 3 minutes, 5 minutes to make a phone call to verify something. Do that and save yourself potentially a lot of heartache, headache, and money down the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I agree though. I mean, non-technical is there's so much you can do from a procedural standpoint that doesn't have to cost money. So in your experience, you've been doing this a while. What are some of the misconceptions that businesses or executives have about cybersecurity that we can sort of shatter here?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions a lot of small to medium-sized organizations have is they think they're not a target. The reality is they're much more of a target than a larger organization typically, because the assumption that the cyber criminals make is a small to medium-sized business doesn't have a big cybersecurity staff, and they probably haven't thought much about cybersecurity. So if I can steal their data, we deal a lot with healthcare providers, and like a small eye doctor or a dentist practice has tons of protected health information records, patient data.
Mm-hmm.
So cyber criminals will go after them to steal those records, the patient data, and then sell it on the dark web because they're valuable. And those people, those small businesses, not only do they have the data stolen and they have to, pay fines to the Office of Civil Rights and disclose it to the media, but typically an attack like that takes a business out of business. So I think it's important to understand, like, it's not just somebody stealing data, it's the aftermath that happens. And most of the time, the biggest fee are the credit monitoring fees that you have to pay to every person's record that was stolen. And those average like $9 or $10 a month. So if you have 1,000 records stolen and you're paying, $10 a month for that, that's for 1,000 people, that's a lot of money. And that's typically more money than a lot of organizations have. And the other thing people think is that our cyber insurance is going to cover everything. That typically isn't true in my experience. The cyber insurance, I mean, people don't ever want to pay out insurance. So they're going to look to see on your application, was there anything you said you did that now we know you actually didn't do? And then if that becomes true, they're not going to pay.
Right. Now you got a double problem. Because
Yes.
now you're going to be liable. And it's true. I just got, it's funny, I'm sitting right on my desk here, something from mortgage company right here that says,
yeah.
hey, so-and-so mortgage is writing to inform you of a data security incident at our company that may have involved some of your personal information. I mean, this stuff happens all the time to everybody. And like you said, if you're a small business, can you absorb an extra 10 grand a month in costs? Probably not. And it's going to put you out of business. But I agree 100%. A lot of smaller companies think they're not going to target, but they're absolutely a target because they don't have the money and the resources to implement the best products and services that are out there. So they've got to be even more vigilant. They've got to even be more careful. And really, they should be training their staff relentlessly on how to spot things. And they better have something at least minimally in place to protect that data or to encrypt that data, or maybe make use of some other, maybe a cloud-based solution that has that absorbs some of that liability from them, right? Because if you've got that data residing on your system and your system is attacked and hacked and the data is stolen, that's ultimately your responsibility. Now, if that data is being held online through a major cloud provider, whether it's Azure or Amazon or something like that, they've got the money and the resources to be able to more securely protect their systems. Now, they may be a bigger target because the criminals know those big systems have more data, but their insurance is going to take care of things if there's a problem. And it does absolve you from having to spend a ton of money on your own internal network security. Now, the flip side of that too is I get clients of mine that are afraid to do that. They're like, well, I don't want to put that data out there. I'd rather keep, that data on my server and do the backups here and make sure that that is not somewhere off-site. And that's fine, but you got to find that balance of what are you willing to risk versus what are you willing to spend to secure that data. And it's not always an easy answer. It's kind of that tightrope. And like you said, nobody wants to pay for insurance, but you sure are glad you have it if you ever need it, whether it's for health or for your car or for
Right.
your cybersecurity.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said earlier, the cyber insurance providers they're not going to insure you anymore unless you have certain controls in place already. And we run up against this quite a bit, and that's like one of our ways of getting clients actually is people trying to get cyber insurance and they don't know how to enable multi-factor authentication, how to do encrypted backups, how to have the specific procedures in place. So we help them with these controls so they can fill out the application with accuracy and actually get the insurance.
Yeah, you kind of work backwards that way. So we've got a lot of stuff happening, obviously, in the cybersecurity space. What are some of the technologies that you feel are going to be impacting businesses' ability to protect themselves going forward, both this year and for the next several years?
Well, we talked about AI quite a bit. I think AI is going to be used by the cyber criminals and by the defenders. So I think that's a technology that if you're trying to defend your environment, you need to keep your finger on the pulse with that. Uh, and that's probably the biggest one. The human element is still the biggest challenge. So from a perspective that I like to take with phishing, because we kind of just do the same thing over and over in cybersecurity and expect a different result. We think we're just going to keep training our staff on how to not click on a phishing email, not go to the website, not open the attachment, but it doesn't work. There are ways to make the training more effective, but we have to operate from the assumption that people are going to fall for the phishing scams. So what other controls do we have in place to prevent them from divulging their password? And even if they do, if we have multi-factor authentication in there, it doesn't matter as much. Or what are the controls we have in place to keep them from opening attachments? Are we patching our systems and our applications? So even if they open an infected Adobe PDF or whatever, a PDF file, it's not going to install something malicious on our system. So I think we need to look at it from that perspective. And those are I think the biggest things in the future is just to, there's really, we like to always think cybersecurity is getting more and more complicated. To me, it's simple things that we neglect to do, like I talked about earlier. And if I think you keep your mind with that and make the assumption people are just going to click on those phishing emails, then and look at AI, I think those are the main areas.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that we don't need to overcomplicate it, and making people understand, especially non-technical executives, look, this is not something that you need to have gone to school for to understand this. There are some very basic things that you need to just understand from a sort of a high level view, right? On what can be done, and then make investments in certain things to ensure that the company can remain viable in the marketplace even after an attack, and having that plan in place to recover. Again, that's one of the things that we focus on is the recovery side of it, because we've seen the biggest companies with the largest budgets still get hacked. So what does that tell you? It tells you it really doesn't matter. You can do and spend all the money in the world. You can have all the greatest technologies, the latest and the greatest stuff that's out there. The criminals are still going to find a way in. So when that happens, because it's not if, when that happens, and it's probably going to happen more than once, in the lifetime of a business, especially now, what is that plan that you have in place to be able to recover from it? And have the procedures and controls you put in place, are they in line with your corporate culture, or are they opposite, or are they not congruent with that culture? For example, you've got a financial institution, well, you darn well better make sure that you've got some serious controls in place, right? And that's expected. You can't have lax controls, but you also can't have a company that's highly creative, like a marketing agency, and have too overly restrictive controls in place that are going to stifle creativity. And so you kind of have to walk this balance based on the type of company and the culture and what the mission and the vision of the company is. And then look at, okay, what are the risks? What are the threats? What's the realistic nature of these threats? How much money are we willing to spend to protect ourselves from those threats? And then even if something does happen, what are we going to do to get back in business and get that product or service out the door as quickly as possible in the aftermath of a problem, and then sort of work backwards. So you look at the minimum that it takes in terms of staffing and equipment to continue to operate, right? And then you focus on getting that minimum back up first, and then
That's
it's
right.
like, okay, now we can go and work on getting everything else back up to speed 100%. And I think that's what companies need to understand, that you've got to have a plan that essentially it's your recovery plan. We talk about disaster recovery. It's disaster recovery for a cyber attack. It's really not much different than a typical disaster recovery plan, but you have to address it from that purely technical cyber standpoint, and understand what those risks are and what the mitigations can be in order to get yourself back up and running so you don't go out of business. And that's
Yeah.
a scary but it's something that's essential. It's critical. That's what I tell my clients. Look, you don't have a plan? You need a plan. Here's 7 steps. This is what you need to do. How detailed do you want me to get with you?
Right.
And try to get them to do that. And more companies are they're understanding that no matter how much they spend in the prevention, that there still can be a problem. Instead of burying their heads in the sand and say, oh no, we're not going to get hacked. We've spent all of this money and all this technology and we've hired all these people and everything is totally good. No, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I agree.
I agree that the plan is important, like an incident response plan, disaster recovery plan. The plan is important, but it's also important to actually practice your plan through some sort of tabletop exercise to make sure people know how to do what's in the plan, and the plan is actually going to work. And it's much more important to do that before the actual attack, obviously.
Oh yeah. You don't want to find out your backup's no good, or that you can't get a hold of people in the middle of a crisis, And then
That's
you
right.
also have to think about the other side, which is, what about the negative PR that you could receive, right? I mean,
Yep.
if your company is hacked and all of this data on your clients and company, customers is leaked out, that's going to impact your ability to do business in the future. Because if I'm thinking about doing business with your company, and I know you just had a huge data breach last year, I'm going to be hesitant to do business with you, because I don't want my data to be at risk. I don't want somebody to have access to my records. And so that, they're going to end up being a PR nightmare that turns into an actual business problem in being able to get and retain clients after an incident. And companies don't think about that aspect of it. They think, okay, we got to recover, we got to get our data back, we got to get back in business. But then now you have the backside of this, which is the legal responsibilities and the fallout from the news. I mean, you don't want to see your companies on the front page of the newspaper with a big negative news article. That's a big problem that can have ramifications that could completely destroy a company overnight, pretty much.
Yeah. And
So
that's why it's important. It's important in those plans to discuss, like you bring up some good points, like an incident response plan, if it's done properly, should point out there like how people communicate and who communicates with the media, who communicates with the authorities. It should be very articulate. So you don't have, and you've seen this before when companies get hacked, you see like 18 different people from the company, 18 just talking about what their thoughts are, and it just makes the situation much messier. It should just be one person, and they know what to do and how to say it and what the narrative is. Not everybody.
Yeah, get on the same page. And that's easy to do. You just got to plan it out ahead of time. And again, you hope you never have to implement, but if it happens, you implement it. And then when it's all said and done and the dust settles and you're back in business, now you go back and evaluate it and say, hey, what went right? What went wrong? And how can we make this so that it runs smoother and it's better in the future? Because again, it's probably going to happen again. And big business, small business, it doesn't matter. You mentioned that earlier, Christian. Small to medium businesses, they think they're not going to be a target because, oh, why would somebody want to hack my business? I'm only doing, $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year, whatever. Well, because they know you don't have the budget for security, and you've probably got some pretty valuable information in your system. So why not see what's in there? And that's what they do. So
Yeah.
you were talking about earlier about climbing mountains and some extreme sports, and you're now your second business here. So a little kind of fun here at the end. We're flying through here, man. This is quick today. But how how would you say that your adventures and your experiences with extreme sports and climbing mountains have sort of influenced your approach to business, your leadership style, and ultimately how you've made decisions, for your company and help make those decisions for clients?
I think the the activities I'm attracted to, most of them have a waiver. You have to sign the waiver that says you might die or lose a limb,
Oh,
like
is
if
that
you do
all?
an Ironman. Well, they're risky. So like I do skydiving and other things too. Um,
Nice.
so I think it's given me a really good perspective on risk. And cybersecurity is really about reducing risk. Like with skydiving, for example, people always think it's a risky activity. It is, but there's a lot of things you can do to minimize the risk. You can have a reserve parachute, an automatic activation device, which if you get knocked unconscious, it'll automatically deploy your reserve. You can wear a helmet. You can have two altimeters. You can be trained. You can, have the right size parachute and not try to do stupid stuff. So there's things you can do to reduce the risk. And there's things you could do in a business to reduce the risk. But the bottom line is, and what I think I learned from extreme sports is there's always going to be some residual risk. You can't eliminate the risk unless you just don't do the activity. And in
Right.
business, that's not realistic. You have to do the activity to generate revenue to keep your business going. So for me, it's understanding that, and it's also giving me some perspective. Like when I start a new business or I'm having difficulty in the business, I realized that what's the worst that's going to happen? In skydiving, I could freaking die, hit the ground pretty fast.
Yeah.
In my business,
Is that all?
I might feel pretty crappy for losing a client for a while, or I might have to get rid of an employee or something. But it's not in the big scheme of things as big a deal as potentially dying with extreme sports.
Right.
Um, so I think it's given me a lot of perspective in that way, and also with Ironman triathlon, I like to say an Ironman's like a lifetime in a day. It usually takes me like 13 to 14 hours to finish one. So throughout an Ironman, you go through these ups and downs, these peaks and valleys, which is kind of like life. Like I remember one Ironman, I was like in the fetal position, throwing up on the side of the road, on the run course. And at that point, I didn't feel like I was going to make it, but I just kind of like eventually stopped throwing up, and I got up and started walking. And pretty soon I felt great again, and I was running a little bit. So it's kind of like that in business as well, and anything in life. I think we go through these valleys, and we often get so focused on the valley that we don't get out of that. But if we just start taking some steps, we'll probably start feeling better, and more revenue will come in if it's your business. You might get some more clients or whatever the situation is. So it's given me, I think, a lot of perspective on things.
No, I love it. I love it. That's a great way to great analogy there to put in perspective, because there's always things that are worse, right? Dying obviously is the worst, right? But there are always things that are worse in life, right? I mean, hey, if you're hacked or you lose a client or there's a problem, you know what? You can do things to get, quote, back up on your feet and continue forward, hopefully. And hopefully that whatever that incident wasn't so bad that it puts you out of business. So you have to keep moving forward and not give up, right? Just like in anything in life, right? You hit a challenge. I mean, I
Right.
do this with martial arts training. I have training in the warrior mindset, and it's a program I've done in speaking, and I teach this to my students. It's you've got to have a mindset of a warrior. You've got to go over, under, through, or around
Yeah.
whatever obstacle stands in your way. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter where the challenge is coming from, right? It could be a challenge from an Ironman competition. It could be a challenge from a relationship. It could be a challenge in business. It could be a challenge with a client. It could be a challenge with a kid. Right? There's these challenges that we're always going to come up against, but you can't just give up, right? I mean, if
Mhm.
your kid's having a difficulty at school, we can't just say, oh, well, I'm sorry, it's too bad. No, you help them figure out a way through it, right? Same thing with
Yeah.
any challenge we come up in life. And we talked about persistence and the goats before, right? Right? You have to be persistent. In fact, that's my personal model is persistence is the key.
Yeah.
Because there are plenty of people that are going to be smarter than you, better looking, worse looking, skinnier, fatter, whatever, right? But the ones that have the persistence and the drive to continue through when the going gets tough are the ones that are going to come out the other side. And that is so critical. And the option of giving up should never be an option, right? You may have to regroup, You may have to
Mhm.
take a deep breath. You may have to analyze your situation, but then ultimately you've got to use what you were just talking about, Christian, pick yourself up and start walking one step ahead at a time, one foot in front of the other, and eventually you'll get to where your destination is. And you may end up taking quite a, a roundabout way to get there, right? Up and down,
Yeah.
around. But if you don't take your eyes off the prize and you understand where it is that you're going and what the goals are, you're going to get there. You just got to be strong in mind, and there's going to be challenges, no matter what it is. We talked about emotional intelligence. That's another part of this, that being aware of that side of it as well. You can't
Mhm.
just focus on the pure intelligence or the pure technical aspect of things. You've got to look at it from a holistic approach. And EQ is big. And for people that are like, oh yeah, I know what IQ is. What the heck is EQ? It's it's become so much more of a thing, I guess you could say, over the last few years. A lot of books have been
Mhm.
written about it. I've had people on the show that have talked about it. It's very, very interesting because it helps you, I think, get a more holistic viewpoint of whatever it is that you're bringing that EQ into, right? Whether it's cybersecurity or a challenge in a triathlon or anything, right?
Right. And we talked about AI a little bit. I think having that EQ is going to be much more important because that's what's going to separate you from the people that can easily be outsourced to AI. I believe technical skills have a finite life shelf, and I believe non-technical skills such as emotional intelligence have a infinite life shelf because they'll serve you forever. And if you can learn the technical skills, a lot of people say they can't learn EQ skills. That's not really true. I think if you have a high IQ and you can learn these super technical things, you could also learn specific things in emotional intelligence. It's just about how it's chunked down. Like for instance, if you want to build rapport, there's certain things you do. You
Mhm.
call people by their name. You smile when you enter a room. You shake people's hands. You introduce yourself. So there's certain things you can do that are very specific. But I think people get too wrapped around this actual is too woo woo, and they don't know what to start, what to do, or what to start in a situation. But I think we can distill it down to these specific actions, get you this behavior. Then that makes it easier for technical people or anybody to really understand how to learn these skills.
Yeah, and technical people usually lack that EQ. I mean, I've dealt with plenty of them over the years, and you obviously have been in a couple different security, in technology related businesses. It's very difficult when you have somebody that has a very focused methodology of like programming and dealing with computers and dealing with technical uh, challenges and day-to-day operations. They're so used to that to then stop and talk to somebody and not talk to them like a computer and have that emotion. It's true, right? I mean, and to have
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that awareness of, okay, I need to change how I'm saying things. I need to change my approach, not be so robotic, be more personable. And it's very difficult for people that are highly technical to do that. I mean, I've time and time again with people. And it's funny, there's a guy who's worked for me for years and years and years. And when he first started working for me, you couldn't even talk to him.
Hmm.
And clients would complain because I would send them out on a job to do, doing whatever IT work it was, go, replace a computer, fix a drive, upgrade a system, whatever it happened to be. And, clients would try to talk to him and he wouldn't talk to them. He would just, he just, let me work, let me work, let me work, and I finally, I mean, it took years to
Hmm.
finally get him to realize, and I lost a few clients over it, unfortunately, because I couldn't be more than, two places at once. If I'm dealing with a
Yeah.
client here and I have to send him to go to a client there, and the clients will go, well, we don't want to see him, we want to see you. And I'll be like, well, I'm sorry, I'm busy. If you want this problem resolved or this thing taken care of now, he's got to go deal with it. And some of them did not like that. Some understood, but they
Hmm.
people want to feel like they can have a communication with you and they understand you, and that you are more than just um, an intelligent, almost robot. right? I mean, people can be like
Yes.
robots, and we don't need more robots. Unfortunately, we're getting more with AI, right? Um, and so I think, I mean, the bottom line is I think that emotional intelligence aspect of interacting with people is going to become much more important as time goes on, because that will be the differentiating factor between a person who has their work and their job outsourced to some sort of AI or bot versus somebody that maybe has some of that, but then is able to harness that and also utilize it and make it more human. And
Right.
we don't want to be talked to like, like a robot, like, hello, how are you today? This is the answer to your question. No, that's no, we don't, right? We don't want that. It's like we want to have a conversation. We want to feel like um, that we have value, that we're being heard, that people understand, and that people are communicating us in a way that is not going over our head, that's not overly technical, they take the time to understand it, and that all is all about that EQ. If you guys haven't watched or listened to the episode of Safety Talk on emotional intelligence, I encourage you to do that, because it was eye opening for me, being a little bit aware of it. But man, I learned a lot from that interview with the person, because it was really interesting to more fully understand it, and it is important.
Mhm.
So, hey man, we could talk all day here, bud. We've already cranked through an hour here already. I appreciate your time. Is there any sort of final thoughts you want to leave with the audience about anything we've talked about or anything we haven't?
I think that the emotional intelligence we've been talking about is important. A lot of people like to say they're just not good with people. I always ask the question, well, what would happen if you got good with people? Because most of us, have parents, we have a spouse, we have children. So if we get better with people, it's probably going to help our lives in a lot of different ways we don't even think about from a relationship perspective. And then in our careers, we may be the glass ceiling, because just like the guy you mentioned that used to work for you, I've had similar experiences. That guy's kind of capped in his career because he doesn't have the emotional intelligence. And I think a lot of people that are highly technical get frustrated that they don't get promoted over someone that knows less than them technically, but the other person is typically has that emotional intelligence or the people skills as well. So I think there's some motivation there for all of us to get better at emotional intelligence. Not just um, people that like our sales staff. I think if you're technical, it's extremely important.
Yeah, and I would say even more important in some other fields, because we are so technical that we sometimes gloss over the fact that we still need to be human and talk to people, that way.
Yeah.
Before we go, I do want to just quick share my screen here, if people can see. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. But if not, you can check out Christian's company, bluegoatcyber.com. I just pulled up the website here real quick here as we're wrapping, but we secure your business and products from hackers. Phone number there. There's a listing of the different services that they have, from penetration testing to information about medical device cybersecurity, and some of their assessment services and audits and things that and training, things that you can look at with your company to you know further protect it and understand some of the things that can be done. Also, different industries they service, again primarily healthcare, but financial as well, and then compliance, which is a big one. Everybody wants to make sure they're compliant now. How do you make sure you're compliant? What technologies are you going to invest in? And you darn well better make sure that they do adhere to the compliances that are required in your industry. So a lot of good information on the website here. I was looking at it earlier. And so, yeah, check out bluegoatcyber.com for that information and to learn more about Christian and his company. We will have the links to his websites and social media below the video on YouTube when we get there. But you can find Blue Goat Cyber on LinkedIn under Christian's name, Christian Espinosa. That's with an S, right?
Yeah.
Espinosa. And yeah, crank right through there, bud. So it was real good talking with you. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your unique perspective as someone who I think very interesting how you can sort of relate the challenges that you basically make for yourself, but they do help make you a better leader and someone who is becomes more successful in business as a result, I would say, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. All right. So again, thank you very much for being with us, and make sure that if you have any company that deals with medical devices and interested in learning more about how to protect them, reach out to Christian and his company. They'll be able to help you out. So until next time, to our listeners and watchers, everybody out there, thanks for watching and stay safe.